Today's episode is sponsored by Hawaiian Hush, Dubai's leading home service salon. Welcome to Season 2 of Next of Kin, the podcast. I'm your host Emma, a British expat who moved to Dubai to further my fashion career when a positive pregnancy test rocked my world. I was asked to choose between my career or my baby, so I realised I needed to pivot and fast. And that's where Next of Kin comes in. Last season, you followed along as I muddled through my first year as a mum and starting my first business. Now I have a toddler, a brand, and this podcast. So join me this season as I jump into my mumpreneur era and try to figure out whether we can really have it all. I've been wanting to make this episode for a while, but I needed to find the perfect guest. Today I'm joined by Sarah Brooks, founder of Fikrah HR. With over 20 years experience in HR, Sarah was named one of the top 101 global HR minds in the hotel industry at the World HR Congress in 2019 and 2020. So how lucky am I to be able to put our questions to her? Navigating HR in the workplace when pregnant can feel tricky, especially here in the UAE where you are often not entirely sure on where you stand and which laws are applicable. This is why I asked you over on Instagram for all of your questions, and I plan to take Sarah right through from what you should do when you first find out you're pregnant to your maternity leave rights, returning to work and beyond. I hope that by the end of this episode, you'll feel so much more empowered. I really wish I knew about Sarah when I was struggling with my own return to work. Before we get stuck in, I want to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Hawaiian Hush. They very kindly offered a 25% discount on any services when you quote Next of Kin when booking. And I've got to say, their prices are really good to start with, so take advantage of this amazing discount. I know that you mamas deserve a little pampering, but struggle to get out of the door, let alone to a salon, so let the salon come to you. They will bring everything from treatment tables to relaxing music, pedicure bowls to UV lamps. You don't need to prepare anything at all, just get booked in and relax. They offer both pre- and postnatal massages by fully qualified therapists. And I also like the idea of bringing date night to you when you can't quite make it out of the house. You can just book in for a couple's massage and treat the dad too. So if, like me, you've been left totally out of alignment when carrying a baby and breastfeeding, or want to feel like yourself again with a little pampering, maybe some new nails, a blow dry, or perhaps you'll book in with Hawaiian Hush for date night. Just don't forget to quote Next of Kin at booking with Dubai's leading home salon, Hawaiian Hush. Sarah, thank you for joining me on the podcast today. Could you quickly introduce yourself to my listeners?
Of course. Good morning, Emma. Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. My name's Sarah Brooks. I run a company called Fikrah HR, which is an HR services provider. So we provide outsourced HR services to small and medium-sized businesses. I work with a multitude of different companies in the UAE, giving them advice and guidance on good HR practices, setting them up with documentation and things like this. My background in HR crosses 2 decades. I've been working 24 years, give or take, in human resources and been in the region for 17 and a half years. So I have lots of experience and skills and knowledge about UAE labour laws, about general HR practices, what's good, bad and ugly, and also from a recruitment side of things as well, you know, looking at people's CVs and giving advice around interviews and how to present yourself and things like that.
Wow. So I've been wanting to record an episode like this for a while, but I don't think we're going to get more knowledgeable than you, Sarah, in terms of HR. So the premise of today is that I want to ask you about all of the HR questions that I come across, questions that my followers over on Instagram have asked, but also all the questions that I had during pregnancy and beyond, and knowing what my rights were from a HR perspective. So we are going to start right from the start. In fact, before we go right to the start and when you find out you're pregnant, is there any differences in the laws and the governing laws around HR when it comes to the setup of the company? So whether it's a free zone company or a mainland company, is there any differences there that we need to be aware of? Because I didn't even know whether the company I worked for was free zone or not when I was pregnant.
Okay. So there is an overarching employment law document, which is a federal law, okay? And that is applicable for every company that is under what's called a mainland license, trade license through the Dubai Economic Department, or a free zone authority. There are three exceptions. One is a free zone called Abu Dhabi GM, so Abu Dhabi General, which is predominantly based in Abu Dhabi. The other one is DIFC, which is Dubai International Financial Centre, which everybody's very familiar with. And the third one is the government. And the government has its own federal authority for human resources that produces legislation. So each of those exceptions has their own employment law document. Probably the most detailed out of them is DIFC, and then probably the federal authority, the government entity one, and then Abu Dhabi GM is probably the least. But they kind of follow the same rules and guidelines as the main labour law, which is Federal Decree number 33 of 2021, and the supporting executive resolutions. Okay, and that came into effect in the 2nd of February 2022, and it's the first change that they've had an update in general labour law since about 1980. So it's well overdue.
We're speaking about those general labour laws, and if anyone of those three authorities, they just need to double check whether this is applicable to them. Okay.
And the general way that you can tell is on your visa. So you'll get a pink stamp, or even on your Emirates ID these days, on the back of your Emirates ID, you'll have your company name. If your company name ends with LLC, 9 times out of 10, it's a mainland company. So it's governed by the Ministry of Human Resources and Emiratization and Dubai Economic Department. If it is, however, any variance of FZE, FZCO, something like this, then it is what's considered to be a free zone, and it can be any one of 40-something free zones in the region. Okay.
Yeah.
You ought to be able to ask your employer for details from the trade license. Your HR department will know which free zone you're under and should be able to guide you on that quite clearly if it is anything. And usually, if an employer has given any documentation, they will define that they are governed by the UAE labour law or the DIFC law, or whichever it is. Okay, so there's sort of a number of different places that you can find out. There is a website that you can use to find out your company name and details, which I can't remember off the top of my head. It's one of those ones that I find useful and then forget it immediately after using it. But if I remember, I'll find it and share it with you, because you can just plug the details in and it'll tell you what your authority is.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So starting right from the start, if someone's to find out that they are pregnant, at what point do they need to disclose that to their employer?
There is no legal requirement for an employee with any time frame for an employee to notify their employer. There's no requirement to do it at interview. There's no requirement to do it at 3 months or 4 months or anything like this, which is slightly different to what is in the UK. And other countries as well that have a bit more of a definition. Obviously, as we know, as a pregnancy progresses, it becomes more and more visible. However, I have known of cases where we didn't find out somebody was pregnant until they got to the 8th month, because they weren't showing an awful lot. It was a very small baby, and they dressed well to conceal it, let's say. So there isn't a legal requirement. However, it is in your best interest to advise your employer as soon as you feel safe and comfortable to do so. You are protected under maternity. So under the maternity leave article, the maternity status article in the labour law, you're protected, and an employer cannot terminate your employment because of pregnancy. So there should not be any risk to you of telling your employer.
Okay. And so if you are really struggling whilst pregnant, if you're having health issues, and it's affecting what you can do at work, are you protected in any way there? Do they need to make any allowances for you?
So the employer has a responsibility to maintain your occupational health and safety during your employment whilst you're at work. and that's governed by a separate resolution to the labour law. Okay, within the labour law, it's also defined that the employer has the responsibility for your health and safety and occupational health and safety. And under, again, there is one article, which is Article 30 of the main labour law with regards to maternity leave. Within that, it actually says that a female employee who is pregnant cannot be terminated for time off taken during or because of maternity, because of being pregnant. So providing you're following the correct reporting lines in terms of your sick leave, your doctor's appointments and things like this, and that they are aware of it, that you validate, yes, I've gone, I'm off sick with morning sickness, for example, for 3 days, and here's a certificate to show it, then they'll be safe. So there's a balance between being protected by the law, providing you follow the rules that are in place. And again, some companies will have their own policies and procedures that are supported by the labour law. And it's important that the employee recognises those and follows those as well.
Okay. Yeah, I know I was sent a maternity policy, and I don't think it included anything like that, but I remember them saying at what point you needed to inform them that you were pregnant, actually. And that actually, it's so wild to me that you said that someone had managed to conceal their pregnancy till the 8th month. But I guess as well, if you were working remotely, then you could just tell them.
Just to freak you out even more, this was with a company that I was working with when I was employed in corporate. She was one of our employees working in the housekeeping department in hospitality. And so she was working an active, physically demanding job until the day she went on vacation. We found out that she, because she came to us and requested time off, she needed to go back home to the Philippines over Christmas. And at that point, she discussed with us that she was pregnant, and that was in her 8th month. And she actually went into labour just a few hours before she was due to check in for her airline, and we couldn't let her check in. We felt so bad because we had to take her to hospital. And this was a number of years ago, before the law changed with regards to unmarried pregnancies. So we felt really bad because we knew what the outcome would be, but we had to do that, protect her own and the baby's safety. So, we were quite distraught and concerned that she hadn't advised us and hadn't let on, because we weren't able to make sure she was safe. But as soon as we did the best thing for her.
Yeah. But I imagine that would have been absolutely terrifying for her back then, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, baby was delivered healthy and safe. Mum was healthy and safe. They were taken good care of by the hospitals. And eventually, when she travelled back to the Philippines, the baby was taken well care of in the transportation and everything while she was kept, because essentially at that time it was illegal. So she was essentially under arrest for being pregnant outside of marriage. We're going back to 2020, 2018, 2019, something like this. So a long time ago.
Well, I could ask you so many questions about that change in the law, because I'm not married. I had Bonnie here in 2022, and that law only changed, I think, the month I fell pregnant, which was January 2022. So that's a very new development, which anyone who's not living in Dubai is going to think that's crazy. Yeah. It's still very, very fresh.
It's a very, very fresh change in the law, along with unmarried partners being allowed to live together legally and not being under threat, I guess is the best word to say, or caution. And the only thing with regards to the unmarried mother side of things, if you do, for anyone who's listening, if you do find out you're pregnant and you're not married, you don't need to rush out and get married, which is what a lot of couples did previously. You can now give birth to your baby. It is worth checking your medical insurance provided by your company, because some of them do cover delivery for unmarried mothers. Majority do not, and that is a caution I would give you, is the majority do not. Check it out before you tell your employer. Give a phone call to your insurance provider and check it out. and then have a conversation with your employer. And then, because they may have some sway with the insurance company to actually make an adjustment for you and acknowledgement for you. If not, then you need to start saving money and finding a package and a hospital and what have you that can give you delivery and things. And it's not just for the delivery; it'll be for all the appointments pre-birth as well, and the checkups.
Yeah. And I think the one thing to note there as well is you are taking a risk, because you can get a great package at a hospital, and really for the care you receive, it's not a crazy amount of money. I know that's all relative, but it's not a crazy amount of money. But what could be a crazy amount of money is if there is anything that potentially goes wrong, if there's a NICU stay, anything like that.
Emergency it's well worth investigating. Yeah, it's well worth investigating that if you do fall pregnant, it is difficult because it would be considered to be a pre-existing condition, but to look out for a insurance policy that might cover you even if you pay for a year's worth of insurance to cover you for that element and any other complications or anything else that happens. Again, it's complicated with regards to pre-existing conditions and coverage on that, because a lot of insurance companies won't cover you if you've been pregnant beforehand, and pregnancy is a very difficult one to flexible with dates is the easiest way to put that. So it's just worth being aware of. And if you're not in and I don't want to sound like somebody's mother, but if you're not in a financially secure situation, if you're not ready to do that, then just take precautions before you get pregnant.
Yeah. It's not always that simple, but my other advice would be maybe go home to give birth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because financially it can be difficult. Okay, I could obviously talk about that for a whole episode, because I've had my experience. I speak to so many women now who drop messages, and there's so many varied experiences, even from hospitals and people who are constantly saying you won't get a birth certificate, all of this, and it's not true. But I'm passionate about this because I hate all the misinformation out there. But let's just pretend everyone's married and everything's straightforward.
No worries.
So health insurance wise, though, I think people worry that if their insurer knows they're pregnant because they've gone to the doctors, that their health insurer is then going to tell their employer. Does it work like this?
No, not at all. The medical insurance company and the doctors and what have you have a strict code of conduct that they cannot share individual claim details with an employer.
Okay.
Ever. Okay. There's the only time that an employer will come to know about claim details is if an employee goes to the HR department and goes, they're not covering my claim, I need help, in which case, obviously, they know. Or if it comes to the renewal time for the employer. So the policies are for 1 year and they do a bulk renewal for the policy. So that's everybody. And the employer will be given a document which is called a technical name loss ratio document, which basically tells them this is how much money was spent on claims. But it doesn't say Marianne spent this much and Sarah spent this much and Catherine spent this much and it was on this, it was on this, it was on this. Very, very rarely. I think once in my entire 17 years have I had a conversation with an insurance company because of a serious illness claim that we weren't aware of because the individual hadn't told us. And it wasn't a case of recovering money or having a problem with the person. It was literally just making sure that the insurance company had done their job right and attributed the right costs to us because we didn't know about it. So if there was an issue, if you see what I mean. But again, we didn't know the name of the person. We didn't know what department they were in. We didn't have any of that information. So there's no crossover on sharing that information whatsoever. And if any medical professional or insurance company does share that information with an employer and the individual comes to find out about it, then I would recommend to raise a formal complaint with the medical insurance authority.
Okay, that's good to know, definitely. So when it comes to maternity leave, what is the current law? How many days do we get? And I know it's days, not years or months, like maybe in Europe. How long do we get now?
Okay, so The total amount that you can take is a total of, there's a guaranteed amount of maternity leave, and then there are extendable portions of maternity leave based on certain conditions. So the guaranteed minimum by law, and some companies thankfully do provide more than this, is a total of 60 days, and it's 60 calendar days. Okay, it's not 60 working days, it's 60 calendar days. And when we say calendar days, that means we start day one of the month on, let's say, the 1st of June, and you count 60 days. So up till the end of June would be 30 days, and then you would take 30 days of July, and then you would, that's it. Okay. Yeah. So your maternity leave in that instance would end on the 31st of July with that 60 days. Okay, just to be clear, so people don't get confused, because there's a lot of misunderstanding between what is a calendar day and what is a working day leave. Okay, so it's calendar days, 60 days, and it's broken down into two sections. The first 45 days are payable on your full wage, so your full salary. That includes all your allowances. So whatever you get on your pay slip as the total amount paid or that is on your contract of employment, that is how much you would get paid 45 days worth of. And then the following 15 days are paid at half rates. Okay, so it's literally half salary. To work out, to give you an idea, if you want to plan from a financial perspective, your salary is payable on a monthly basis. So let's say you receive 5,000 dirhams per month as your total salary. In order to find out how much your daily rate would be, you would divide that by 30 days. Okay. Some companies do a slightly less generous calculation where they annualize it, so they multiply by 12 and divide by 365. There's dirhams and fils in it. It's not a big difference, but that's just in case you get a different number from what your company offers you. That might be the calculation that they're doing, but they can't remove any allowances. They can't remove anything from your salary whilst you're on maternity leave for that calculation.
Okay, and maybe this has changed since I had Bonnie, because I thought that you got 45 days, and then to get the full 60 days, you needed a doctor's note. Is that still true, or no?
You need to obviously provide a certificate to your employer to state that you are pregnant in order to avail the maternity leave. Okay, the same as any other sick leave that you take, you need to provide that sick note. All right. Yeah. But there is no legal condition that if you don't provide it, you don't get the extra 15 days.
Okay. I thought that you would only get, or is that an extra allowance if you are too unwell to return, that you get an extra 2 weeks or something? There was something around that.
If you are, I mentioned that there's two extendable elements to the maternity leave. So that 60 days of the 45-15 split is you provide a doctor's note to say, I'm pregnant, due on this date, and they go, happy days, when do you want to start your maternity leave? Okay, and that's everybody's right. If, however, you get ill or your child is ill, then you can take extended maternity leave, and you can take an intermittent or continuous 45 days unpaid if your child is sick or if you are sick. And I say unpaid, and I mean continuous and intermittent, in that you can take 1 day a week for 45 weeks.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
You could take 2 days a week, because that's what they mean by intermittent. Or continuous can be a stretch of 45 back to back. In order to avail that, you need a medical certificate stating that your child is sick, or stating that you are sick for that amount of time.
What was the other extension that you were going to mention then?
Yeah. So that's if the female worker gives birth to a child, or a sick child, or a child of determination whose health condition requires a constant companion, so a constant carer. And that again has to be supported by a medical report, and then you would have an extension of 30 days with full pay. Okay, and you can extend that by a further 30 days of unpaid leave. So you can get an additional 60 days split 30-30, paid unpaid, if you have a child of determination or a child that needs a constant companion due to medical reasons.
So you've got the 45 days unpaid if you are unwell.
Or your child.
or your
Yeah.
child, and then
Yeah.
and then if you have a child of determination, then you've got 30 days paid and can also extend
Yeah.
that with unpaid.
Yeah. And that kind of also is, for example, if your child is in NICU or something like this and needs extended support and care, then that secondary extension of 30 days paid plus 30 would come into place there.
Okay.
You understand? So
Okay.
it's kind of, because you've got the two clauses that are saying, well, you can extend if your child's sick and you can extend if your child's sick. But the difference is that this would be a sickness that might be, let's say, I don't know, the child isn't sleeping or has an upset stomach or something like this. Then the initial 30 days sick leave, 45 days rather, would be eligible there. If it was more where the child needs to be taken care of 24/7 and the mother needs to be there as a more serious illness, then that's where the extendable with 30 days would come in. But again, in both cases, you do need to have medical certificates to support this.
Yeah. Okay. And then what about premature births? Because we all work towards going on a maternity leave at a certain point, and you discuss that with your employer. But if you're to go into labour early, even months early in some cases, are there any allowances there? How does that work?
There's no allowances for premature births. The maternity leave can start whenever is needed. So a lot of women here tend to work up until the last day before their due date, dependent upon obviously the nature of the pregnancy. However, I know of cases where a mother has gone into labour early and they've been in contact with the employer and said, look, this is the situation, we need to start maternity leave today. And that's what it is. I mean, I think I don't think, I would sincerely hope that an employer wouldn't be so stupid as to say, no, you said it was going to happen on the 19th, so you've got to stick to that, and you're not, you've got to come into work, you're absent. Why? Because I was in, yeah. So there's no sort of additional leave given because of that requirement. But that might be that you would take your maternity leave, and that might be a case where you could get a medical certificate to extend your maternity at the end. So you have to consume the 60 days standard maternity leave before you can do any add-ons.
Yeah. Is there a requirement to be with the company for a certain amount of time to get any benefits like this?
Under mainland law, no. Under DIFC, yes.
Okay.
So mainland law is, it doesn't matter if you start tomorrow and you find out you're pregnant the day after. There's no limitations on that. There used to be in the old law, but they've removed that. In DIFC, the eligibility is the same in terms of the number of days, but you would only get half pay if you've been there for less than a year.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
And when it comes to being on maternity leave, from the company's perspective, are they allowed to get in touch with you, ask you to do anything, or do they need to leave you alone?
Technically, they ought to be leaving you alone. I think it's prudent for a company to be in contact to make sure everything's going okay, rather than waiting until the end of the day and it's too late, or you find out after the fact, just from being a healthy employer, so to speak. But depending on the nature of the work that you do, there may be an occasion where something comes up that wasn't foreseen, that we just need this piece of information from Emma. You can make a call as to whether or not to ask the question. I would say no, unless it's life or death. If you see what I mean. And most people will, if it is that random of a thing, then it should be whoever it is that's asking for it, whatever. If it's a client or a colleague or something, they should be understanding and compassionate, I would hope.
Yeah. I know. I remember an assistant I had at the time, and I said, look, if there's any little questions, just WhatsApp me. And I'm sure most people would say the same, but at the same time, that person needs to know that you probably aren't going to reply straight away. And if it was something bigger, like a task that needs to be done, that to me would be off limits.
That to me would be a no as well, of like, don't reach out, don't get in touch. That's not fair.
I tell you, actually, a similar sort of situation I had a new manager start whilst I was on maternity leave. And before I went back to work, they wanted to meet for a coffee. And I said, look, I don't have childcare, so it's probably not going to be possible, but I can do a Zoom. And she kept on saying, no, it'd be better to go for a coffee. And I said, no, it'd be better to do a Zoom. And this went back and forth quite a lot. Who's being unreasonable in that kind of situation?
Oh, she is. I think the new manager, and I think I would like to hope anyways, that had that gone back to your HR department at the time, and said, look, I'm trying to get in touch with Emma, but she's insisting on doing a Zoom, that HR would have turned around and said, yes, but she has got like a 3-month-old baby. Like, you know, I don't think it's unreasonable for her to have a quick 15-minute Zoom with you whilst the baby's asleep, rather than having to pack everything up, take the baby with, go to a coffee shop, deal with all of that in front of you, and be, you know, you want to meet her and build a relationship and have time to get to know her when she's worrying about first impressions and her baby and the environment. And that's just not fair on you as an individual and as a professional. So I would say that, yes.
Good. Well, at least I feel validated from this. That's given me
Oh, no,
validation.
Yeah.
When someone asks so many times, you're like, am I the one in the wrong here? But at least now I know. Okay, let's talk about returning to work then, because this is something that I found quite difficult, and it's not something I really anticipated. When you're pregnant, you're just like, well, the baby will go to childcare and I'll go back to work. What's the issue? And then you have the baby, and the return to work was on my mind 24/7, and it's just dread. And I think a lot of women feel that, not about returning to work, but leaving the baby, basically. So what allowances are there when you first return to work? I knew about breastfeeding allowance, so time that you can take to, I can't remember, you can tell me how many hours that is a day and how long that lasts for, but it's essentially time where you can be breastfeeding or leave early to go and breastfeed. Or
yeah, so a mother, after they return to work within the first 6 months of birth from the date of delivery, so it does cover the time whilst you're off on leave, okay, is entitled to either 1 or 2 breaks a day to breastfeed the child, providing that the breaks do not exceed an hour, okay? Now, considering that the majority of workplaces do not have a nursery on site in which you can put your child so that you can leave work to go and breastfeed your child on site, that it would probably take you more than half an hour, especially with device traffic, to leave work, to go home, to have the breastfeed, to pack up, to come back to work again. It's not really a feasible thing. So what most companies do is club that together and allow you to leave an hour early from work. On the day, and obviously it's paid time, but to leave early from work by an hour or start your work an hour late in order to support the new mother with that requirement.
Yeah, or I guess as well, they'll be pumping, and I believe that they need to be able to have a place on site for you to do that.
Yeah, there needs to be a nursing, like a safe place that the mother can do breast pumping if necessary, and have the facilities for refrigeration or anything else as well.
Okay. Has that gone down? I'm sure it was 18 months or maybe even 2 years. No, I thought it was 18 months.
It was a year or 18 months in the old legislation, but the actual maternity side of things is extended. So they've kind of balanced it one with the other, because previously you didn't have the exceptions, you just had maternity leave and that was it. You didn't have the additional extensions that you could do based on illness and things. And it's worth remembering that you've got the additional maternity leave based on illness, either the 45 days unpaid that you can utilize with a medical certificate. So if you feel that you're not able to attend work for whatever reason, then you can do that, provided you can get a medical certificate. Additionally, there is parental leave, which is 5 paid working days leave that can either be continuous or intermittent, up to the 6 months age of the child as well.
Okay. And that can be taken for any reason, or do they need to be sick? Or
no, that can be taken for any reason. But most companies will have a procedure in place for a notification of that. It's not like you wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning going, I'm taking parental leave. But, I want to plan to take Friday off, for example, or I want to take, because you've got 5 days up until the child is 6 months old. So it's in your interest to take them as soon as you get back to work almost. Otherwise you lose them, because your child will very quickly become more than 6 months. If you've been off for 60 days, that's already 2 months old. If you extend by that 45 days or the additional, then you very quickly get into that.
Yeah. And we haven't spoken about the dads, have we? What's their rights in terms of paternity leave?
Unfortunately, there is no defined leave for paternity, but there is the 5 days parental, so that is eligible also for the father. And it doesn't matter if both parents work in the same entity. I just want to put that out there. So there are some companies who will employ the husband and the wife.
Yeah.
Both of them in that instance are eligible for the parental leave.
Okay. So you potentially got 10 days there between you.
Yeah.
Okay. For those then who are returning to work and were struggling with it, what can they ask for in terms of flexibility? Are there any rights, or is there anything that would be reasonable to ask?
Unfortunately, there's no legal rights to ask for in terms of flexibility. I would suggest that if you're able to do it before you return to work, that you reach out to your line manager and or your HR department to confirm when you're coming back to work, what the requirements will be. And if you need any allowances or exceptions to be made, then you can have that conversation with them before you come back to work. So that can alleviate a little bit, a couple of weeks beforehand, alleviate a little bit of the stress and the anxiety for you in that situation. I know what I would do if I were an employer being asked questions, but I can't obviously speak on behalf of the majority of HR departments across the country. You will have to gauge it based on your company. The one piece of advice I would give is that, providing the worst answer they can give you is no, you're not in a worse place. So there's little harm in asking. And if a company, and to be very blunt, if a company turns their nose up, doesn't make any exceptions, especially if you've had a tough time of it or your child isn't sleeping or whatever it might be, if they turn their nose up at it, if they give you a hard time, if they start treating you differently because, in a negative way, then you need to think long and think hard about how long you stay in that company, because that's not a healthy environment to work in. It's not a supportive environment to work in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a red flag, isn't it, for the future?
Absolutely. And it's a possibility. We've all heard of and met those people who will be, oh well, she asked for this, well that means she's not performing, and that means she's not doing, she's had a baby in her brain. And it kind of goes back to the old 1950s mentality of women in the workplace and who go a bit doolally after they've had their baby and this, that and the other. It's a big red flag for me.
Yeah, absolutely. But unfortunately, you hear a lot of horror stories, don't you? And it's not just in the UAE, is it? You get this in the UK, where we've got normal rights.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, in the UK, there's a little bit more of a support network from the government around flexible working. It is part of the mandates for in the employment law in the UK to you can apply for flexible working, and there is a process for it, and it has to be considered and reasonable adjustments made, or a reasonable reason, but if argument as to why it's not able to happen. There just isn't that understanding over here yet. I live in hope that it changes soon, but yet.
Yeah, well, it's all going in the right direction. Each time there's an update to the law, it's that bit longer maternity leave and everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
What about when you return? Do they have to put you back in the same role, or can you be moved to a different role?
No, you go back into the same role. I mean, they could approach you whilst you're on maternity leave and offer you something else if they, but I would take that as being a red flag, unless it's a promotion. Or like, sometimes companies do restructure and reorganize things when you're not present in the business, and they're not going to sit there and go, oh, well, Emma's not here, so we can't do this. If it needs to be done, then they need to do it, but they ought to be communicating that with you prior to returning to work, to say this is what's happened. But they can't reduce your salary, they can't take money away from you once it's in your contract, and that they've been paying you. They can't reassign you to a role that is drastically different from the one that you've been doing at any stage of your employment without your explicit agreement and involvement in the process of, this is the job that we'd like you to do. So your expectation to return to the same role with the same level of seniority and the same level of salary is 100% correct.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, interesting. I also know of someone who was made redundant whilst on maternity leave. It seems unfair, but is that lawful?
No. Redundancy. So under the letter of the law, there is nothing mentioned as redundancy. Okay, it happens an awful lot over here because it's an easy get out for companies to remove people without doing proper performance management and things. There is a stipulation in the law, however, that if somebody is being given notice for their employment to be terminated for any reason, disciplinary or redundancy or whatever you want to call it, that the notice period cannot start until they return from work, or return from any period of leave. So if they're on sick leave, if they're on maternity leave, if they're on annual leave, their notice, even if they're on public holiday leave, their notice period can't start until they get back to work.
Interesting.
So they could give notice, i.e. they could write to this person and say, we're writing to inform you that your position is going to be made redundant. We are giving you advance notice of this. Your notice will start from, and it starts on the dates that they're due to return back to work. For example, that could be documented to them in advance, but it can't be that, well, you're on maternity leave, your notice starts whilst you're on maternity leave. That's not legal.
Okay, makes sense. So for anyone who's working for a company right now and they are not sticking to these rules and they are in maybe a little bit of a toxic situation, where do they go for help?
So depending on the licensing authority for their company, and this is a little bit that we spoke about earlier, if they are under the mainland or Department of Economics, they can contact and reach out to the Ministry of Human Resources and Emiratisation. There is a telephone number, which is 6,000 something or other, I can't remember, it's on their website. But again, I'll drop you the details so you can include it for anyone that needs it. It's a free service to call. Make sure you've got time to do it, because sometimes they take a bit of time to answer the phone, but they can give you free advice on your situation. Okay. If it's found that a company is acting illegally, then they can say, they will ask you if you want to make a complaint. They will say, no, that's not right. Do you want to make a complaint? And they will support you in making a complaint against your company. Okay. That's a fairly straightforward process. Under any of the free zones, depending on the free zone, there is the same structure set up by the individual free zone. And that's why it's worth knowing who your free zone is. Do it now before you need it, so that you can then reach out to the employment sector or the employee sector of that free zone. Some of them are better than others. DIFC is very good. JAFSA is very good. TCOM and DMCC are getting getting much better. And others are catching up. But they then will have the same sort of employee consultation process. It's less likely to be as consultative as the ministry will be. It will more be, well, what's your complaint? Okay, we'll make it, kind of thing. So you might be making a complaint that's unfounded, if you see what I mean. So I do offer and I do support individuals to help them. So if they have any questions and queries, if they are feeling awkward about something, if they want to reach out to me through either directly through my profile on Facebook, or through my website, or through LinkedIn, even, Messenger, and just quote, heard you on Next of Kin, then I'll be happy to answer any queries and give them such advice that I can. I'm not a lawyer. I can only interpret from my experience and give advice based on my knowledge and awareness of the law, and how to handle things, what the norms should be. But I'm happy to talk to anyone that needs it. And I've done that with
Great.
quite a number of people.
Thank you. I'll add all of those links in the show notes for this episode as well. Okay, Sarah, we should probably wrap up. I feel like there's so many questions, but it gets very like individual circumstances, doesn't it, at this point? So I think that's a good place to leave it with all the broad questions people might have. Before we finish, do you have a recommendation for a small business here in the UAE that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yes, and I think it's one that's quite pertinent for the topic that we've been discussing today. And it's a company called First Time Mom. It's run by a fabulous lady that I met a couple of weeks ago called Hajar, and it's a website that provides bundles or individual items for first-time mums and newborn babies. So it's predominantly just for that age range, but looking at everything from packs, what you need to take to the hospital, or the key things you need to worry about at the different life stages of the baby, just in that sort of immediate period after birth.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And thank you for answering all our questions today.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, Emma. I'm happy to help and happy to get the information out there to people.
Well, if anything from that podcast, at least I've got some validation and feel like I can pick holes in what my HR did with my whole return to work situation and maternity leave situation. So yes. Now, if you've made it this far, there is one topic that Sarah reminded me of when we finished recording. One thing you may want to be aware of and informed on, and that is what happens if, unfortunately, a stillborn occurs, or a death of the baby after they've been born, and you are still entitled to your maternity leave as long as you have been, pregnant for 6 months before this happens. So yeah, not a topic any of us want to think about really, is it? But I thought I would add this in before we finish the episode because it's important to be informed. So thanks again to Sarah. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please do follow and go and follow me along on Instagram as well. Please also share this episode with a friend because I really want to get the right information out there. I think there was so many nuggets in here that I totally didn't realise. I guess the rights that I had when I was pregnant, I know the laws have changed slightly since then, but I would have been in a far better position had I known this information. So please do share this with a preggy friend. Anyway, till next time, take care.